Well, good evening, everyone. This is Keith with Positively Osceola here for yet another episode of our Coffee Club Talk Live. And like I said, this is a real tool resource we actually use here, not a prop. Just putting that out there so you all know. So let's have a little casual talk. We'll do the casual unofficial welcome first, and then we'll make the whole thing official. But I really super honored tonight. Got some great folks here that in Positively Osceola, we talk a lot about making a positive difference in Osceola County, and I've got three folks with me tonight that absolutely do that. And I'll see if everything's a little backwards, so I'll point the other way. There's Wong over there, Huntington Learning Center, and then direction down there would be Joel Ferguson, financial advisor Edward Jones, and then Will Moria. Also, it's hard to do the diagonal thing correctly, but I did it. That's Will Moria, also from Huntington. How you guys doing?
Great.
I am super excited about being able to have this discussion tonight. You know, it's not a new thing now. We've been dealing with educational challenges and evolving, I guess, for really almost what's pushing closer towards a year now. And I think when it's all in our rearview mirror, we're going to look back and say, the glut of it was not good, obviously. But some things have come out of it that I think have helped areas in our world that needed help anyway. And I think maybe educationally, that could certainly be one. Certainly financially, that's another that I think we're learning some things that we'll probably not let go when this is all behind us. But again, welcome to all you guys, and I'm glad you're here with us tonight.
Thanks for having us again.
Very cool.
Thank you.
And I'm going to probably give a personal testimonial before we get out of this tonight, which I'm so glad I can do. And when I say we're not just fellow organizational and business leaders, I'm also a client. All right, so let's go ahead and we'll kick this thing off and make it official. Well, again, this is Keith with Positively Osceola here with another one of our Coffee Club Talk Lives, and I'll do the official announcing. Hopefully, Joel, you've got audio from everyone tonight. So what I'm seeing is on my right would be Wong from Huntington Learning Center. How are you, man?
Great.
Thanks for being with us tonight. Also from Huntington, directly below her is Will Moria and so glad you're here as well tonight, Will.
Great to be here, Keith. Thank you.
And then I've got Joel Ferguson from Edward Jones. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. It's a beautiful night, or at least it looks like it behind you. So
it is. And it looks like we're in for a warm spell. So let's just get right at it. I think this is going to be one of those conversations that I'm going to ask you to direct me on some points of content sharing, because you have so much to share, and that is the point, I think. So for someone who doesn't know much about Huntington, why don't you go ahead and tell us who you are, what you do, and where you are, maybe.
Absolutely. Thanks, Keith, for having us again. We also have the honor to have Joe joining us from Edward Jones, and personally, I have worked with that company for many years as a software provider. So as far as Huntington, we are passionate about education, right? All things education from K to 12. Tonight, we have the opportunity to have three, brilliant gentlemen, including you, because we're going to put you on the spot for some SAT tests in a little bit. But we're going to learn a little bit about, what exam prep process looks like for students, and who should be prepping, when they should be prepping, scholarship opportunity, the whole college entrance process. And then we're going to learn a little bit from Joe, his advisor, and how families should be planning financially for student going into college, and it's never too late to get started, right? So Huntington has been in business for helping students since 1977. So we provide a simple solutions to all things academic, right? Especially the struggle that they go through. Student faces at some point during the the school years that they have. So this is what we're here for. A lot of people don't think that we are a traditional school, but we're actually accredited school. The only difference that we have versus your private or traditional school is that we do one-on-one teaching here at Huntington. So tonight we'll focus on exam preparations, and this whole workshop is geared to focus on how students should and when they should get started and take advantage of some of the opportunity financially on scholarship opportunities.
Oh, awesome. And let's move that down to Will. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do at Huntington, if you don't mind?
Of course, Keith. Well, of all the days I could be on here, today marks my 7-year anniversary to the day of being with Huntington Learning Center. I first started with them out at a different center that I will not name at this time, but I had the opportunity to join the St. Cloud location last summer, and I saw this as a real opportunity to not only really take a step up, but also to help out a community that I see very much is in need. And with respect to this potential workshop, I know I do a lot of the exam prep side as far as, the ACT and the SAT, but it's not just those tests. We also have, GED, ASVAB, we even help GED, and even those who are kind of already in the college and they're just needing a little bit more help to kind of get to where they need to be. So our programs are designed to help, ACT test scores usually gain at least a good 2 or 3 points on average higher, if not more, if they make use of our online resource called Huntington Online Prep. And on the SAT side, to increase your scores by a couple hundred points. Because as we know, with college admissions being more competitive every year, that small increase can make a big difference for sure. Well
said. And so, how do you want to start discussing what one of the core issues we're here tonight about with exam prep? How do you want to move through that tonight?
That's a great question, Keith. I think we can keep things very casual, but more on the informative side, so that we can provide, as a workshop for resources that parents have some of the questions that are common when they have seniors and even starting from freshman, high school time. Our centers run on sensors, so sometimes you will see us gone dark. It does not mean that there's a power outage. It's just
our goal is to not keep students in the dark, Keith. That's why we're here.
Well said.
Yeah, so we're going to start by looking at some of the landscape right now of what students are facing and parents should be aware. And then we'll go into a little deeper dive with Mr. Will on the differences between exams and the scholarships. And I will wrap up with some of the timeline as to when they need to start prepping and when they need to start preparing certain things in terms of application process, setting meeting with their guidance counselors, writing the college entrance essay, looking at financial planning, and then we'll segue into Joe's expertise on how families should look into do that. Does that sounds like a good plan?
Awesome. Go ahead, take it from there.
Okay, sounds good. So Keith, I think you have something to share on your screen too, or you want me to just go ahead?
Well, I can do that. Did you want to work with that video to start it all off?
Let's just figure out with something on the fun side and hear some student has to say about our exam prep program.
Sounds good. Here we go.
I'm not a good test taker.
I'm not the best student, but I'm trying really hard. I'm trying all the time.
In school, I'm doing very well in my classes, but when it comes to standardized tests, I get really stressed out.
To go to the college of my dreams, I need to get good scores.
And I'm struggling. As much as I try, I can't get my grades up.
I knew I needed a scholarship, and I was afraid my ACT score wouldn't be high enough to qualify.
I realized the only way to get over my fear was to handle it head on.
So I went to my counselor, and he suggested that I go to Huntington Learning Center.
The tutors, they were great.
When it came time to take the tests, it wasn't like usual. I wasn't nervous or scared.
I was ready for it.
I wasn't nervous.
And I was confident.
And then I got my test scores.
I did well on my test, and I want to give a lot of credit to Huntington Learning Center.
Not only did they help me with my SAT scores, but my grades generally in school went through the roof.
I'm able to go to the college of my dreams now.
I'm so happy.
So much depended on one test. I feel confident about all my tests now.
That's a lot of fun. And did you guys enjoy the music? So just like our student has shared with you that, Sarah, Brandon, we're here not just to help them to get into the college of their dream or maximize these scholarship opportunity, but also to build that foundational skills that they can have that sustainability for the 4 years to come. The college dropout rate is staggeringly high right now at 45%. I wouldn't mention the kind of school that is having these statistics, but it is across the board. So just because you can get into college doesn't mean that you can continue to succeed through it. So Huntington will help you to build that foundational skill through the exam prep here at our center.
Awesome.
So one of the things that I wanted to start is just to look at the landscape as to what students are up against today. Do you want to have some visual aid put up on your slide?
Sure.
Talking points, or you want me to just go ahead and get started?
I'll share that.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Keith. So I am one slide above you, I believe. If you don't mind, just go one slide above.
We'll give it a shot here.
That first one. All good.
Oh, I know. We're good.
Yeah, as you were just going through the slides here, we just wanted to provide some visual aid for parents to see what they are up against today. There's more students applying for colleges than ever. Today, 27% of students submitting more than 7 applications is normal. I just heard one of our associated friends and teachers, friends of the teachers here, that her daughter submitted 25 applications, right? So you know that everybody's planning to hit the best college of their dream, and they're just applying so many places at one time. So parent needs to stay focused and help their student to be competitive among all these applicants, right? So the number of seats available has not been kept up and an increase in enrollment because schools are not getting bigger. They're the same size. By having all these influx of students applying, our student needs to be more competitive with their scores, with their academic GPAs, with their extracurriculums and community services and leadership skills. So all in all, we're looking for that well-rounded student experience when a college admission counselor is selecting the candidates. So that's a landscape I would want parents to be aware of and be in tune of. The next slide kind of gives you a little bit of importance about why college degrees is important, right? It gives you the socioeconomic statistics as to the average when you go into trade, which is great if that's your heart desire. But if you typically go into a more of a academic driven 4-year college or 2 years junior college into the 4-year degree, you're looking at at least 30 to 60% increase in the basic salary that will start you off into the society. And not to also mention that you will be able to pursue the dream of career that you have either in one of the professional fields. So we highly recommend students to not only graduate from high school successfully, but look at college entrance as a catapult ways into the society to pursue that mission fulfilled, mission driven life that they want to live. So this is very important to know that college degree is not an option today. It should be something that should be part of every student's future life plan. Again, going back to what we talk about competitiveness, right? Mr. Will and I were just going through some of these statistics. They actually have gone up as we speak. This is about 4 or 5 years old aggregate total based on some of the most competitive schools from various different parts of the country. As you can see, obviously Harvard, they only accept less than 10%, and right now on average about 6%. And Harvard University, their college entrance score typically are the highest, where typically they have 1600, which is the highest SAT score that you can score for SAT, ACT 36. And even then, it does not guarantee you into these colleges. So you can see the landscape is indeed very competitive. I am an alumni of University of Texas at Austin, as well as UCF. On average, these two schools are expecting an average of a SAT between 1250 to 1500. So the more that we look at the data, the more it tells us that we need to get our student ready. And by virtue of having a good GPA does not always mean that you're a good tester. We heard that from Brandon, right? He's has anxiety about taking standardized testing. So there are skill sets that Mr. Will can elaborate more on how you can build upon those skills when you're here learning our exam prep programs to turn a good student into a good tester as well. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay, perfect. I'm just punching these throughout because this is a great PowerPoint presentation. Has a lot of resources, and we can share this with you, Keith, so you can actually share with the community.
Okay.
Okay, awesome. So how do we choose the factor that influences the college admission process? Obviously, we talk about this, GPA, your exam prep score, courses that you have taken. But more importantly, the well-rounded student experience is what college admission counselors are looking for. Have you done any kind of community services? Have you written a really compelling essay about the goal that you want to pursue to identify the kind of person that you are, student that you are? Those are things that we can definitely help at Huntington. And recommendation letters are also very important. You're enrolling in any kind of athletic programs, your coach's recommendation or your music teacher's recommendation. Those are things that we want to help student package into their admission process. Again, interviewing process is something that we should all kind of brush up our skill, because beyond colleges, we all wanted to have that good experience during your first job interview, right? So start with a miniature of that. That's something that we also wanted to help our student to build stronger skill in communication during interview process. So one of the things that we do is we bridge the gap between us and school. So we work with not just the parents and student, we also work with the guidance counselor at their high school, so that we actually communicate back and forth, knowing that they're improving here. We want to convey that with their coaches and guidance counselors so that they also give us feedback as to how the students are doing in some of these areas that we need to make sure the factors of influencing college entrance opportunity is maximized.
Excellent.
All right, next, I'm going to go into this very briefly because I think Mr. Will have a lot of things that he has to say about the differences between SAT and ACT. What slide are you on, Keith? To see where you are. Are you just showing me? So this is the page that we kind of talk about how the scores are being used during the college entrance process by colleges. Many parents have asked us about college not deeming these exam scores options, meaning test optional. It may apply to some of the states that you have read in the news. However, we just learned by our close colleague with College Board, we regularly meet with them as a corporation. They have informed us that test optional really is just a misunderstanding, nomenclature about the process itself, because even if a school say we don't really require you to submit your exam prep score, SAT or ACT, if you are taking any kind of AP courses, SAT and ACT is indeed required. So you can't really skip that. It's just something that parents need to be aware. They should always submit the SAT or ACT score when they are applying, whether it's in-state Florida colleges, schools, or out-of-state schools. So just something that we wanted to keep everybody aware. The next slide, I would then, segue into our friends, Mr. Joe here, to talk a little bit about investment. But college, as we all know, is a big investment. The time and effort that you spend in Huntington to prep for it is a small, minute percentage to the kind of scholarship opportunity that you will get as a result. Florida Bright Future Scholarship covers somewhere varies between 75% to 100% of all the tuition for the next 4 years. That's something that we highly recommend our students to take advantage of. And typically they will hit that score goal if they follow the regimen of how they should study and how they should focus in class, do the homework. For Mr. Will, that HOT program that we so passionate about is something that I think is brilliantly designed, that students should take advantage of, having that 24 hours resources to them and learn at home. So college is a big investment. I think, Joe, you have some good resources that parents should learn a little bit about how to plan for this big investment and get the best return on that. Would you like to go ahead and segue into some of the material that you have to share with our parents?
Sure, absolutely. As we can see by those numbers there, college is not cheap. Those of us that have been in college and experienced that, especially recently, you can see how much it's gone up. Looking at just local schools, tuition alone at UCF right now is a little over $7,000 a year. So going back to those numbers, you're looking at $30,000 for 4 years at UCF, and that's not including your room and board, your fees, your books, anything like that. So again, college it's a huge investment. It's well worth it. We saw that from the results of how much more you get when you have a bachelor's degree and everything like that. So it's worth the investment. But my job as a financial advisor is to make sure we're planning through those things properly. We figure out what school we want to go to, what the costs are going to be, how much we need to save, how much we're planning on covering on that, as well as with the help of Will and Weiwei at Huntington Learning Center, hopefully getting some scholarships, getting those academic ones through the university itself. And something I encourage all of my clients to do and their children to do is to treat applying for scholarships like a job. You spend an hour, 2 hours every week doing that, you'd be amazed how much money you get from scholarships. All that stuff adds up.
Let me interrupt for just a second. I'm sorry. I know I didn't want to do that. But so I keep wanting to ask you, so when is the perfect time for a parent to come to you or a student to come to you? Either, and you can all answer that, but since you're on the financial end of it, when do you like to see a family or an individual or a parent come to you and say, look, I'm going to need some help in this. I know I'm going to. And when do you like to see that happen?
In an ideal world, you had a kid last week, you see me today, but we know that's usually not the case.
Mm-hmm.
Usually it's, life happens, you get distracted, then your kid's in middle school, entering high school, and you're like, oh, wow, college is happening. We're 4 years away. That's usually when, I have those conversations with my clients. Because again, it's never too late. Even if your kid's going to school in a year, at least having that conversation saying, okay, here's what you can expect. Here's the expenses you're going to incur, just the application cost alone or tuition, things like that. Making sure that you're going in there prepared and you don't get that, the receipt or the bill at the end of 1 year and you get that sticker shock.
Right.
Things like that make a big difference. So again, the easy answer is it's never too late, but obviously the sooner the better, because on my end, it gives us more time to invest and get some better returns, things like that can hopefully save you more money without you having to put it out as much yourself.
Great. Now, I know from personal experience, it seems like we're seeing that in some of the college. I think the content that they share is not something that's going to be proactive. At that point, I think it's more of a reactive scenario saying, look, if you're not careful, if you're not intentional, you're going to end up with a large student loan at the end of this game. So these are big subjects. How would you like to progress from this point? Wait.
Joe, is there anything that you wanted to add at this point, or we can come back to you when we discuss about timelines of preparation? We can come back to you for a little bit more specific.
Yeah, I'll just make one more comment, then we'll hand it back. The other aspect of it is, what situations can be best financially. We talk through, we throw up the numbers again, going to a private school or even going to locally Valencia College for 2 years, something like that. There are other alternatives to save money. At the same point, you're still using your test prep and everything properly and still getting the best results like that. So again, that's where having that conversation, the earlier the better, but as you get closer to college, it's extremely important to have those conversations, make sure you're on the same page and know what you're doing.
So does that, for you, does it, because I know at Edward Jones, it's a very comprehensive scenario. You try to look at the whole picture of finances for people. So that's got to be, the earlier the better, obviously, for that as well, because it's a piece of the overall finances, even for the parents themselves. That's going to affect what they're doing in the future. I've got to believe that comes up into that whole conversation.
Yeah, of course, because if I'm doing my job properly, we're looking holistically at everything. We're trying to balance your goals, making sure everything you want to achieve, we're doing the best that we can, obviously within reason, because I could say I want to retire in 5 years, but that might not be realistic. So again, we want to make sure we balance all those things out. So the more time we have, the better it's going to be. Again, I love a challenge. We can just about make any situation work or figure something out and develop some kind of plan, or at least find the right steps to get there. I think that's the biggest key, is walking away a little bit more educated, a little more knowledgeable as to what your options are, what you can do, and partnering with someone like Huntington Learning Center to make sure you're getting better test scores, which opens up more opportunities at scholarships, which reduces the cost to go to school, or at least the out-of-pocket cost to go to school. Things like that are well worth it and make a big difference.
Well said. Very good.
Well said. Thanks, Joe. So coming back to taking a deeper look from the subject matter expert, our resident expert here, Mr. Will, to share a closer look at the differences between the two tests, which a lot of people are anxious, should I take the SAT? Should I take the ACT? So we're going to go into a little bit deeper dive on that. Will's going to give you some of the education on that, and I'll come back to talk about timelines and when students should be preparing for certain things in their freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior years. And then we'll come back to Joe to learn more about how to come up with the funds. Go ahead, take it away, Will.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much. Yeah, we go from all this things of well said to Will said. So here we are at this point of the segment. All right, closer look at the SAT and the ACT. So what I've noticed from when I was in high school to when I first started with Huntington, now 7 years to the day, I've noticed that these tests have been kind of in trends. Okay, like when I was in high school, it was all the SAT, right? I heard of the ACT kind of just in name only, whatever. It just didn't really matter to me. And the SAT was this fairly gargantuan test that you had to take. The higher score you get, the better. But when I started with Huntington all these years ago, I've noticed that, oddly enough, the ACT was a lot more popular. And I know there's quite a few differences. I don't know if you want to show it on that slide, Keith. It might be a little more easier for us all to see. But it's interesting for me to notice that all these years ago, the ACT itself has stayed the same all the way since, insofar that it's roughly a 3-hour test with an optional essay. Clearly the score differences are distinct from the SAT. The ACT is a 1 to 36 with an average score of about 21, and there's no wrong answer penalty. And that's something that really made the ACT a lot popular starting in the mid 2010s and perhaps even earlier, considering that the SAT for the longest time, you got docked a quarter of a point if you got an answer wrong. The math itself was a lot more theoretical, wasn't really so real world as the ACT has been. So really in the past few years, the SAT and the ACT, there's a handful of differences, but from an outsider's perspective, there's a lot more similar than people give credit for. I mean, you're looking at a 3-hour test with an optional essay. There are no traps in the sense that you're going to walk in there and be realizing, okay, pop quiz, you're going to be reading Renaissance art. If you didn't study up on that, well, too bad. They don't have those kinds of traps. And then the question types themselves are pretty similar in the so far that you have multiple choice responses, generally 4 choices. The ACT has anywhere from 4 to 5, depending on if you're taking the math or English or reading. There are student-produced responses in the math section. So once in a blue moon on the SAT, you're going to actually have to pencil in your own answer. And that could be a little intimidating if you have the benefit of A, B, C, D responses, at least a 25% chance of getting it right. The SAT still challenges students to say, you know what, we want you to do some thinking and see if you can't get the correct answer on your own. But in terms of all the varying focuses of the subject itself, as I try to get myself not be so in the dark all the time, of course, the SAT and the ACT, they kind of touch on similar topics, right? They're talking about a comprehension of varied text passages. So you're dealing with social studies, you're dealing with prose fiction, you're dealing with natural science, you're dealing with humanities. So you're dealing with subject matters and passages that you're likely to encounter, if not in the upperclassmen years of high school, then certainly in the first year or two of college, as you're starting to read more, dense textbooks, you're going to have to read a whole bunch of, similar resources that are pretty, I won't say deep, but at least a lot more, a lot more complex than maybe some high schoolers are accustomed to. The SAT is a little interesting too, because you're also getting asked a lot of questions as it relates to having to determine what is the author's word choice and really the relationship between text, graphs, charts, and tables. That's really one of the biggest differences of the SAT today versus the ACT, is that on the SAT, you have to go from charts and graphs as it relates to maybe a political science passage or natural science, and how do you compare this to that, and then having to then justify your answer with a follow-up question based on this information. You can use lines whatever to whatever, right? ACT is not like that. It's a lot more, factual-based questions or inference questions, or maybe one or two vocab questions, but not a whole lot of you really have to compare like to like, aside from paired passages, which are found in both SAT and ACT for sure. Now, when it comes to the writing section, they're kind of worded a little differently. On the ACT, it's referred to as the English section. SAT is referred to as writing, but they still touch on the same concept as it relates to, grammar and language usage. How do you determine the author's diction, their word choice, as well as similar writing structure, being asked these editorial style questions of, should the author include this, 2 yes answers, 2 no answers, and you're going to have to sort of still determine which is a correct answer based on what is presented in front of me here. So it's a lot more rapid fire, but there are a lot more straightforward questions. There's not a whole lot of, you have to really think too hard about it. Usually the right answer will kind of jump out to you, and the wrong answers will kind of stand out like a sore thumb. The math is where things get just as distinct as well, because on the ACT, you have the ability to use the calculator across all 60 test questions. And you're right, that is 60 test questions, but you have 60 minutes, but you can use it anywhere from 1 to 60. And this kind of math generally touches on arithmetic and trigonometry, but the ACT has long been based on having math that is a lot more real world, a lot more practical stuff that you can actually use beyond high school and even beyond college. You're more likely to encounter the difference between 2 points, or perhaps the slope of one to another based on degree measures. You're more than likely to deal with that versus stuff that you might not consider beyond the scope of the test. So one of the huge differences that the SAT made back in the mid-2010s was they really revamped their math section, Keith. And we'll actually look at this kind of on the next slide briefly. Is not only did they make the SAT math a lot more real world and practical, they also incorporated a lot of other subject matters within those questions. So, for example, they will actually give you questions on the next slide, if you will. Yeah, on history and social studies, they'll give you like a whole bunch of text and maybe a table, and you're going to have to use your math skills to not only translate that problem, but still get the correct answer. So the SAT, to their credit, has really revamped for the better insofar that they're trying to test students on questions you're likely to encounter in real world settings, as opposed to, again, all these hypothetical scenarios that made the SAT math pretty daunting, even up until, say, the early 2010s period. On the ACT side, as you'll notice here, history and social studies is only really seen just strictly in the reading section as it relates to certain passage types. You're not likely to see, in fact, you're not as likely to see a social studies or history piece on the English section, unless if it happens to touch upon something of that matter. But usually history, social studies kind of stays to its reading section on the ACT, whereas on the SAT, you'll see that as well as natural science found spread throughout all 4 test sections. And again, on the ACT, a natural science passage is found at the tail end of the ACT reading section, as well as its own standalone section at the end of the test. But as I've always told students across the years, is really science is not really, that difficult. If anything, it's more reading with charts and graphs for the science section, because you have all these data, you have all these experiments, but really there's a whole bunch of paragraphs, and you're being able to comprehend what's in front of you, knowing when to weed out the filler and what matters. That's what's critical moving forward in college and life beyond, because you can't always just read what's in front of you and kind of take it at face value. You got to be able to be, a little bit more critical and think, how is this relevant, and what can I use to, make everything not turn off the lights all the time. Okay. Clearly, the censors in this room do not like me, I guess, but that's okay. Or I need to be a bit more proactive, maybe.
Talk with your hands a little bit more, Will.
Okay, well, anyway, that's really the main distinctive points between the SAT and the ACT. I'd say compared to when I started at Huntington and even when I was in high school, the test itself is a lot more different, but nowadays, it's a little more similar than different. But even still, we have students who honestly test stronger one over the other. And in fact, that's kind of part of what makes us very appealing, is that we'll have a student initially come for the SAT and then maybe first session find out, hey, let's try the ACT. And if they're much better, then we switch accordingly. Or in fact, we just had a student a while back who started out with the SAT, kind of tested about halfway through, found out that you're actually making a lot more progress on the ACT, maybe for the sake of the question types, time management. You're just better off going to that, and then we adjust accordingly. So we definitely work with all those test types accordingly in terms of what plays to a student's strengths for sure.
Excellent.
I'm really curious about the next slide that follows thereafter, Keith, because I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I put you on the
But we do.
yeah, exactly.
That's not good. You know, I have control over the admin here, so
Goodness.
that's what I'm seeing.
Well, it's not strictly a Keith thing, by the way. It's a Joel thing or anyone else out watching their thing. We kind of want to see, and hopefully the answers don't show on the slide on the next page, but we kind of want to show you guys what an SAT math and reading question looks like, just for you guys to see out there, just how less intimidating it actually can be versus what you might have thought growing up or when you were in high school way back when for any of us there. So I don't know if you could pull up that slide, Keith. I want to see that SAT math question for a second.
Well, I'm sorry. I seem to be having a technical difficulty.
You're having technical difficulty as well.
Well, conveniently, the answer is on the page too, so it's just a little dabble of the experience then.
And
How about that? The answer is an A. And what are we here for? More A's, right, Wei?
That's correct. That's right.
So here's an SAT math question just to kind of show you what it looks like and how to sort of work around it for anyone else watching here. So you notice we have a graph on the SAT, and they're so kind enough to even give you the link if you're interested in saying, I don't believe this. Well, believe it, it's there. But see, for example, that surveys of these numbers of breeding bald eagle pairs in Alabama were conducted between 1996 and 2006. The results are shown in a scatter plot. Based upon a line or curve of best fit, which equation best models the relationship between T time and A, the breeding pair? A is a constant. So I guess because the answer is obviously there, should I just jump straight into why A is a correct answer?
I'm not sure how to answer that other than yes right now.
Well, notice here, everybody out watching, that all of these dots are slowly curving upward, right? Now, normally, if this were what we call a strictly linear relationship, that these dots would be coming in a very straight one-to-one, like in a very straight line pattern, correct? But notice here that starting from year 2000, and then really for the 3 years in each point in 2003 and 2006, those dots are moving up pretty quickly here. So we're not dealing with a linear expression. So if nothing else, that eliminates answers B and C. Because T expresses time in a strictly linear concept. So we have to relate to either A or D. Well, the reason it's not D is because, first of all, in a negative graph, that slope will be trending downward. If anything, I'll be suggesting that not only are these bald eagles not breeding, they're going to become extinct by the mid-2000s. We don't want that either. So we definitely want that graph T squared plus A to trend upward. And that squared, of course, is resembling an exponential function where over the course of time, the number of bald eagles breeding are going up very, very quickly. So that's why A is the correct answer there.
Excellent.
And we're going to see the exact same thing on the next slide on an SAT, what's that? English reading. There we go. SAT reading passage. So it'd be helpful to bring that slide up just to see what that looks like all together. And once again, another A answer. Hooray! 4 A's. Excellent. Just like my last name. All right, here we go. So we have another passage. And once again, this is a history social studies passage about what's the issue here. So it looks like we're dealing with the U.S. Department of Agriculture dealing with some are poor, many are prosperous. Okay, sounds like a very interesting passage for its time. So obviously in that first paragraph, it talks about how population loss is a longstanding concern among rural development practitioners. Half of the non-metropolitan counties lost population through net outmigration for the last 20 years. Over 700 counties, the losses exceeded 10%. Population loss tends to increase tax burdens, reduce property values, reduce demand for food, for supply of local goods and services. And rural outmigration is troublesome because it's highly concentrated among young adults, especially those possessing or acquiring education and skills. But what makes outmigration counties different from non-metro counties that gained from migration, or at least had a more manageable loss over the past 20 years? So I read that aloud to kind of give us, keep in the back of our heads, y'all, about this question here. What's the primary function of the first paragraph of the passage? Generally, an opening SAT or ACT reading passage, first paragraph tends to discuss the point at hand. Usually it'll give you its typical thesis statement. If not at the beginning, then they kind of notice how they phrase it at the end as a rhetorical question, or at least it engages the reader to say, I need to know more. Why does outmigration county patterns differ from non-metro counties? So if we look at the other answer choices, just to kind of eliminate why the other answers are wrong, Well, you really can't summarize findings of previous research based on the first paragraph. And even with these numbers and some statistics, you can't really draw a whole lot of conclusions from this, And we're not really introducing an argument of the entire passage for the sake of the context of the scope here. We just don't know the length of the entire passage. And it doesn't really feel so much like an argumentative piece anyway. It feels more of a very curious questioning. This is where we are in the world and how can we sort of learn from things, and to present conflicting viewpoints which will be compared and contrasted. I don't really see this as that kind of a passage, because otherwise I'd feel a bit more of a strong opinion one way or the other. It really feels like a discussion piece, like we're going to find out why does this question matter throughout the course of the passage, and that's why A is the best correct answer here, to explain the importance of the question that the report explores itself going forward.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm. So if we go to the next handful of slides, this is where we go to start to see how do we get a leg up on the SAT or the ACT? How do we get where we're at and perform better, right? So really the strategies for improving your score, they're really not that dissimilar. If anything, they're almost, they're pretty much like to like, right? For the SAT and even the PSAT, for perhaps any underclassmen, freshmen, and maybe some sophomores for the PSAT, in addition to the ACT, a lot of these strategies are very much the same. Should you guess? Well, the answer to that is yes now, because there is no wrong answer penalty for guessing. And worst case scenario, you've got at least a 25% chance of getting the answer correct. If you flat out don't know, pick B or C or whatever your guess letter is. That's what I always tell students. Pick something. Do not leave these questions blank. At least give yourself a chance, okay? Do something. But knowing how to go about dashing through the questions, knowing the kinds of questions you can always get, sometimes get, you never get, that's very advantageous as you progress through the different questions and the different passages. To that point, you shouldn't omit any questions, because those are just lost points. Even the possibility of lost points can be really debilitating. Analyze a question. I always do say yes for the sake of time, because, again, this is a time test. In theory, if I gave somebody an SAT or an ACT over the course of the weekend, in theory, they should get every question correct, right? But for the sake of the time of the test, as well as obviously the overall pressure being that this score could get me into a UCF, a USF, a University of Florida, then yeah, it could be pretty crushing for those who can't manage their time well. And that's another important skill that we really try to emphasize a lot each session on the ACT or the SAT, is that each question is worth the same number of points. It's not like the harder questions are worth 2 or 3. They're all worth 1 point. So don't try to overthink yourself, and certainly don't expend more energy than you have to, right? This is a marathon, not a sprint on this test, okay? You don't want to overexert yourself and end up being completely exhausted by that third test section. Otherwise, that SAT or ACT score could really go down if you're not pacing yourself well for the sake of time, right? So when it comes to knowing the test, as well as knowing yourself as a test taker, one of our important features of being at Huntington is that we do also offer a very detailed score-by-score breakdown, as I keep having to flail my arms to prevent being on the dark. I swear, this room just...
Free light show.
This room is ridiculous. Huh?
It's all good. It's all good.
It is. It's all good. Well, for the sake of just kind of going through this somewhat briefly, because obviously this is meant to be sort of a sample, not really any one given student sort of situation. This is showing anybody out there part of our test analysis. So this particular individual took the HLC SAT math section here, and we have score breakdowns by varying categories like heart of algebra, problem solving, data analysis, passport to advanced math, additional topics in math. So this particular individual obviously needs help in just a little bit of everything. They can't even crack 40% correct on all questions here. So SAT math is definitely a need of focus moving forward. That particular individual. Let's see what's on the next slide, Keith.
Sure. Seamless transition.
Seamless. So this is a good example of showing our score-by-score breakdown based on the calculator section for the SAT math. You see that this particular individual had their selected answers, and if the answer is incorrect, you'll notice that the correct answer is accordingly as such. The difficulty in terms of whether it's an E, easy question, M, medium question, or potentially an H, hard question, as well as its category type and question type by primary focus here. So let's see what's on the next slide. This, of course, shows the English test of the ACT this time here. So we have the production of writing, knowledge of language, and conventions of standard written English. This particular individual is certainly above average in all three categories. So most likely it's just a matter of maybe it was a certain passage or maybe a handful of questions that they didn't do too well on. And maybe that's the need of focus as we discuss this, not only as part of the initial conference following a student taking a test, but also throughout their sessions as far as seeing where they're at and how they can get better, right? So what's on the next page? So that same individual for the ACT English section here, notice that this particular individual has not gotten off to a pretty good start. In fact, across the first 13 questions, they missed more than half, but they must have rebounded and did pretty well throughout the test if they've managed to get higher than 55% across all three sections. So maybe it's that first passage that kind of threw that individual for a loop, or maybe it's quite possible, maybe a little bit anxious because on the ACT, English is the first section. So maybe that person's not a morning person. They're just a little bit of test anxiety. That can be explained a myriad of ways, right? But needless to say, the overall detailed analysis that we do is critical, not only in the beginning of a student's program, but throughout as well. We don't want to feel like this is just a one-time thing. We offer this throughout a program to not only see where a student is at, where they can be, but what we can do more to go forward and adjust accordingly. And how do you prepare? Well, when it comes to a couple of important skills as well, as I go through this one final slide here, really the road to success starts with that first bullet point. And as I was discussing with Weiwei before we got on here, the way I say it is the only place where success comes before work is in the dictionary. And that's true not just in school, but here at Huntington or really anywhere in life the more you think about it, right? You really have to work hard, put in that effort. You're really going to have to trust the process, to use another sports cliche that I'm apparently so accustomed to saying. Just in general. Trust the process, of course. But develop learning skills need to succeed too. So this is not strictly just an us thing. It's also this is things that you should have been dealing with over the course of those last 9, 10, 11, 12 years of an individual's academic learning, right? Obviously, we're here to fill in the gaps where they may have it, but these tests are not meant to, study how well have you been to this point. This is meant to sort of project how far can you go beyond high school, even beyond college, because the better you do, the more likely you are to not only overcome perhaps any challenges in college, but life beyond. If you are dealt with something that you're not sure of, how can you best work through that accordingly? And then when you overall come to that test day itself, you obviously have to eat a good breakfast, or to which I say, treat that Saturday like a typical Saturday. So if you're normally not a big breakfast eater, like I know I'm not much of a big eater altogether, then just stick to what you're used to, right? Try not to make a big day out of it. Don't make it feel like this is such a grand event that, it's either do or die. No, it's not. It's just 3 to 4 hours of your life. And once it's done, right? So do that Saturday like you normally do. If you listen to music to relax, do that too. If you're the kind of individual to show up on a test wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt, by all means do that too. Who cares, right? All that matters is the score on that test, not how you look at 8 a.m. on a Saturday, because, oh goodness, I don't know. Oh, mercy. Anyway, definitely though, be you, be comfortable, but really treat this like, this is just but another step toward achieving the greater goals. And that's kind of not only what we do for ACT, SAT, but even just for the entire community of St. Cloud Kissimmee. So these are just reminders to let any student or parent know that, we're here to provide those tools necessary to help your student achieve those successful goals and really get them to where they really want to be overall.
And remember, eat a good breakfast, wear comfortable clothing, and bring the correct calculator.
That's essential. Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's good job, Mr. Will. As you can see, Keith, that our resident expert, subject matter expert, is truly passionate about helping our students, with full knowledge about the strategy, the methods, the knowledge, how to. Some of the things I want to be mindful with our time together here that we're sharing, just to point out some of the importance throughout, freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior years that students need to be aware and when they need to start prepare. If that's okay, we just gotta go through that real quickly for the next couple of slides.
Of course.
Yeah, so during the college admission timeline for freshmen, I really just wanted to point out, Keith, you probably have it on the slide there too. obviously getting good grades starting from, ninth onward, you wanted to do your best because they start looking at that. They, meaning the, admission office from various different colleges. Make sure you're studying and get really good grades. That's generally, like Will said, facts of life and regimens and belief that you should be practicing ever since kindergarten, right? But the last 3-4 years of your high school typically is the most important time. So we do offer subject tutoring for areas that you need to strengthen before you start exam prepping. AP exams are also important to make sure you get the best results of those classes that you attend. And a lot of students don't really know about this, secrets to the success of the path of the college entrance process is attend college fairs. During COVID, obviously, a lot of them are being done virtually, but this year we should start by seeing a lot more traditional ways to conduct these college fairs. Attend them. Get as much resources as possible. It could be overwhelming, but when you come here to Huntington, bring those material with you and talk to our teachers and myself and our admin team to help you and work with your guidance counselors to find out what will be the best process for you in terms of the application process, writing the best essay for that college or the list of college that you want to do, and start volunteering at church, at your local community, wherever you service best. Connect with people. This is truly to build that self-image, from inner and outward, to build that, community identity as to why you belong to certain verticals that you wanted to excel in life. So the next one is for our sophomore students. The sophomore years are critical that we recommend that, students do not delay further than the fall year of sophomore, which is fall of 10th grade students should start exam prepping by coming to a resource like Huntington, where they have a one-on-one teaching instruction to learn about what will be the best tests that they should take, either it's SAT or ACT, what kind of scholarship money is available for them based on the GPA and the community services that they have. So the next slides that you have, Keith, there, I think it's slide 23, talks about sophomore years. Yep. So that's the one that we wanted to just kind of point out real quick. When you share this with the community, they can obviously see all these good resources and points that we have made here. One thing just to update the community, SAT has, the College Board has announced that the SAT subject test is no longer being offered, starting effective immediately. So students that are planning to do the SAT subject test, or what we call subject SAT test 2, is no longer part of the administration, so we don't have to worry about focusing on that. The other thing that the College Board had announced on the SAT changes is the essay being optional will also be eliminated altogether starting from June this year, 2021. So student who wants to stay competitive and submit their super score on the essay side, we recommend that they submitted it during the March and May tests. So that's something we wanted to point out. To our students that are currently in the sophomore year or junior or senior year that are taking future SAT exams. The next slide, Keith, is for our junior students. Yep. So during this time right now, we're in the year of spring. We want our students to start visiting the colleges that they wanted to see, take a campus tour, exam prep. Obviously, this should be something that is ongoing starting from the fall season of the sophomore year all the way through senior years. We have some students that are here in their senior years. They're prepping more than 250 points in differences of their current stage of best score versus the score goal that they have. It's a little late. It could be stressful among all the classes that they have on top of the score goals. So we do recommend students that, take advantage of time, start early. Start from the fall of your sophomore year is the best time that we recommend students to start focusing on that, college entrance path. But if you're juniors right now in spring, those are the things that you need to focus on. Ask your teacher what kind of essay you should write. If this is something that you don't know, your teachers don't really have time for you, this is something that Huntington can help if you enroll with our exam prep program. The next slide is for our seniors. Seniors during the springtime that we recommend them obviously just to check all the deadline based on the upcoming exam that they are taking, making sure that they stay in focus with the program, the progress that we have. Each student enrolled in Huntington also get practice tests. Each practice test also have 2 hours of review session with a one-on-one instructor like Mr. Will and somebody that's professional and certified with the education degree from the state of Florida. And all of our materials are College Board bound, meaning they're same as what College Board will offer you for the ACT and ACT test. Just one thing I wanted to point out, Keith, also our average increase on ACT is about 6 points nationally, and the average increase in SAT is about 230 points. We are very proud here in the St. Cloud Center that we have a young lady that actually increased her score by 280 points on the SAT. She had qualified for the 100% for the Bright Future Scholarship. So we're most proud of that student. Another student also increased 9 points on his ACT and is now enrolled in West Point on his way to serve the country and be academically successful.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so we are very proud. Again, those are our track records. Believe it, you can see and hear the passion from Mr. Will and all that we're sharing here, the resources available to you. But I also wanted to take advantage of Joe, his expertise and time to talk about specific programs that students and parents should be aware to start early, and that is available to them, right, Joe? So if you wanted to share with the community a little bit about that, that would be, I think, awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And this will be kind of broad speaking because obviously each situation is going to be a little different as to which one's most appropriate for you. But we're fortunate enough in the state of Florida to have Florida Prepaid. It's a wonderful program. They have a few different platforms. You can either cover all of tuition at a 4-year university. You can do a combination of community college and a university. Now they're starting to include room and board in that. So you start from any age, birth, 5 years, 6 years old, whatever it is, and you do a monthly payment plan until they go to college. So it doesn't matter how much tuition, room, board, all that stuff goes up. You're locked into that price, so you're good to go there. The downside to Florida Prepaid is if they go out of state, sometimes they don't accept it, or private school, sometimes they don't accept it. So that's going back to Weiwei's point of do your research, figure out all these plans in place if they're going to work or not, because that's going to have a huge impact on financial aid. The second thing is 529 plans. This is where you actually start investing and use the market as a platform for you to grow your money and just save a little more aggressively in that aspect. But that one gives you a little bit more flexibility. So sometimes it's appropriate to pair Florida Prepaid with a 529 plan. Sometimes clients want to do just a straight 529 plan because you can use that in any school in the United States that's accredited. But again, it gives you flexibility to cover anything higher education related. So whether that is books, other fees, some people can justify using it for food plans and things like that. As long as it's school related and benefiting the student, 529 plans are wonderful. Outside of that, you do have different categories. You have custodial accounts. Technically, you can use IRAs, things like that. That's where it gets a little tricky and really is a personal decision. And I would highly recommend, even if you don't work with myself or someone at Edward Jones, sit down with a financial advisor, someone that knows this stuff and can walk you through what's going to be the best decision for you. Just because that's a major decision. It has especially when you're talking about taking it from IRAs, that has a more long-term impact. But again, our job as advisors is to sit down with you one-on-one and figure out what the plan is, the steps to take. And of course, as life changes and hopefully good things like someone gets a scholarship, what you can do now with the money. So there's a lot of fun options, a lot of great things, but yeah, that's at least college planning or college finances in, I think 2.5 minutes. So not too bad.
Great job.
That's great. Well said.
Great job.
Well, what hit me was something my father used to say, and not just him, of course, which is, what's the best day to plant a tree? 20 years ago, and the second best day is today. So, but it's really obvious that the academic side is plan ahead, the financial side is plan ahead, the light sensor side is plan ahead. So
Yeah.
all great information. Anything else you want to say, Wei Wei?
No, I just really sincerely want to thank you for the opportunity for us to show our passion, and also thank Joe to join us. And Edward Jones is such a great, financial advisory. There's so many out there. Why do we partner with Edward Jones? Obviously, my past connection and current connection, but they are a 14,000 location strong company. Right. I've been to their campuses, and everybody that you talk to is just as passionate. They may not be as good looking as Joe, but they're just
appreciate that one. I don't know about that, but
Very important.
Great companies. So every parents, every opportunity that we have, that we sit down in conferencing for their exam prep opportunity, we want them to visit them just to learn about, if anything at all, what are the resources available for them, right? And as far as us is concerned, as you can see from Mr. Will, our passion is to help our student grow, no matter what grade they are. Today's focus is exam prep. So we hope to help more students. There are 64,000 students in this Osceola district. And you can just do your aggregate of the seniors, the freshmen all the way to seniors. Those are the, prospective parents and students that we can help potentially. So we hope that this workshop enlighten people, inspire people, give them a little bit extra resources that they are not so scared to approach this subject matter, and then know that there are good people behind it in the community, and people like you that help us broadcast the good news to people so that they know where to get help.
Yeah, it is good news. Why don't you, Wei Wei, real quick, and then Joel also. Let's go ahead and let people know if they see this down the line, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you to have this discussion?
Yeah, thank you, Keith. The best way to get a hold of us really is just come to our Facebook and go to huntingtonhelps.com, and it's a location activated website, so that no matter where you search from, you'll be routed to the closest location. There's 300 locations around the country. Obviously, we want to think that we're one of the best centers around all 300, but our reputation and our passion kind of make the reputation, right? So go to our huntingtonhelps.com, our Facebook, or call us at 407-789-0228. We always pick up the phone. If we don't come to you quickly, we always return a message within 24 hours.
Excellent. I'll make sure that gets into the actual text description in the Facebook post. And Joel, please as well, share how people get a hold of you.
yeah, absolutely. The easy answer is edwardjones.com. Just like Wei Wei said, it'll find someone that will be a good fit for you, whether it's myself or someone else. Like she said, Edward Jones advisors truly are passionate, and we'll sit down with you, and it's consultation. It doesn't cost anything to have that conversation. So yes, that'd be the starting place. And if you like me or you thought I was as handsome as Wei Wei said I was, you can call at 407-203-8337.
Excellent promo. I'll take just a couple seconds myself. I know that we already were working with Huntington, and my son, first semester at school, little testimony real quick, and everything going quite well, but didn't have the result on his first major math exam that he had hoped. We went back and forth whether maybe it was okay, we'll start over on another semester. Maybe we'll drop this course. I say we because we work together, as a family all the time, but it's really him. And so I reached out to Wei Wei, and certainly Will was a major part of what helped my son. And it unfortunately was slightly under the gun, as it was, I think, 2 weeks prior to the exam. But I believe that if I'm correct, he missed one on the next exam, and I believe he missed one on the final exam. So major turnaround. I felt like a genius counseling him, saying, Huntington is the way to go. But it was really the relationship that he built between you, Wei Wei, and Will, and he listened to you, and it made a huge difference. So I appreciate you very much on a personal level as well.
Thank you. I mean, that's what we're here for. We have brilliant teachers like Will, and really credit is all his for the amount of help that he had invested in your son's academics. So we truly are proud of the progress.
Well, we're proud of you guys as well, to be honest with you. All right, well, there you have it, folks. A great session full with lots of rich content. Certainly something you want to access, and we'll continue to make that so that people could find that to be. And there's that censor. It wasn't just you, Will.
That's right.
Hey, it's not just me. It's not just me.
It wasn't personal at all, as we just proved.
There it is.
There you go.
I guess that's the fireworks you're out looking for. So again, before Joel's and my light actually turns off as well, we will sign off on this one. Again, this is Keith with Positively Osceola, along with Wei Wong from Huntington Learning Center and Will Moria from Huntington, and of course Joel Ferguson from Edward Jones Financial Advisor. Together, we are making a positive difference in and around Osceola County. Have a great night.